They say, money changes people. But the truth is, it only reveals who they've been all along. My name's Richard Dawson, a widower, a retired construction worker roar. At least that's what most people thought. For years, I lived simply. Wore old boots, drove an old truck, drank cheap coffee, and smiled when people underestimated me. Because behind that quiet smile was a secret worth $53 million. Sometimes the richest man in the room is the one no one bothers to look at twice. That money wasn't stolen, inherited, or won overnight. I earned it brick by brick through decades of hard work, smart investments, and one lucky land deal that changed my life. But I never told anyone. Not even my son, Michael. He grew up thinking we were average folks. And honestly, I liked it that way. He worked hard, fell in love, and planned his own future without ever asking for a dime. That was the kind of man I wanted to raise. At least, that's what I thought he was. When Michael told me he was getting married, I couldn't have been happier. His fiancée, Sabrina, seemed charming on the outside. Polite, and always ready with a perfect smile for social media. But there was something behind that smile, a sharpness, the kind of charm that hides entitlement. You can always tell when someone is in love with a person and when they're in love with what that person has. I offered to pay for a few things, but Sabrina refused. That's sweet, she said with a laugh. But Michael and I have standards. We'll take care of it. I shrugged it off. I didn't need to prove myself. Let them plan their perfect wedding, expensive, shiny, full of important people. I was happy just to watch my son walk down the aisle and start a new chapter of his life. But the night before the wedding, everything changed. I was sitting in the corner of the rehearsal dinner, quietly watching, when Sabrina's friends started whispering. I overheard her laugh, a cold, sharp laugh that sliced through me. I just hope his dad doesn't wear that same cheap suit tomorrow, she said. He looks so poor. My friends might think we picked him up from a thrift store. One sentence can turn love into fire and respect into ashes. The table went silent for a moment, and then they laughed. Even Michael didn't say a word. He just looked down, embarrassed not for her, but for me. That night, as I drove home alone, something inside me snapped. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. They wanted important people at their wedding. Well, tomorrow, they'd get one. They just didn't know. He'd be the one writing the check for everything they thought they owned. Never mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes it's just the sound of revenge getting ready. The morning of my son's wedding, Shidvey, felt like joy, the kind of day a father dreams about, but all I felt was the echo of Sabrina's laughter from the night before. Those words, "He looks so poor," clung to my mind like smoke in an empty house. Sometimes the loudest insult isn't shouted. It's whispered just loud enough for you to hear. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my old navy blue tie, one that my late wife, Margaret, had bought for me decades ago. It wasn't new. It wasn't flashy. But it had meaning, and that's something people like Sabrina could never buy. The wedding venue was extravagant, a vineyard estate overlooking the hills. I arrived early, quietly, not wanting to draw attention. The guests wore diamonds and tailored suits. I wore my modest jacket and scuffed shoes. The looks I got from some of them said it all judgment in polite smiles. You learn a lot about people by how they treat you when they think you beneath them. As the ceremony began, I saw my son Michael standing at the altar, looking nervous but excited. And then Sabrina appeared, a vision in white, but I couldn't see a bride. I just saw a woman who valued appearances above all else. When the officiant asked if anyone had objections, I stayed silent. This wasn't the time. My moment would come later. During the reception, the toasts began. Her father, a proud, booming man, talked about his daughter's impeccable taste. Then Michael stood up, his voice shaking slightly as he thanked everyone for coming. He glanced at me for a brief second, his eyes filled with a flicker of guilt, before looking away. That was the moment I knew for sure. He'd made his choice. Finally, it was my turn. Dempsey announced, and now, a few words from the groom's father, Richard Dawson. A polite, almost pitying applause filled the room. I walked to the stage, microphone in hand, and looked out at the sea of expectant faces. All eyes were on the poor father in the cheap suit. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice steady. "I'm Richard, Michael's father. I want to start by congratulating the happy couple." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Sabrina, you look beautiful. And this venue, it's breathtaking. In fact, I was so impressed when I first heard about it that I decided to do a little research. I saw Sabrina shift uncomfortably. Michael's smile tightened. "It turns out," I continued, "that this entire estate, along with the catering company, the floral designer, and even the band, are all owned by a single investment firm, a firm I happen to know quite well." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It was a recent statement from my portfolio. "You see, for years, I let my son believe we were a simple family. I wanted him to learn the value of hard work, not the value of a dollar. I never told him that the small construction company I ran was just the tip of the iceberg." I unfolded the paper. "That investment firm, I own it. All of it." A collective gasp went through the room. The whispers started, but this time they weren't about my suit. They were about the numbers on that piece of paper. Sabrina's face had gone pale, her perfect smile crumbling. Michael looked as if he'd seen a ghost. "Sabrina, you said you had standards," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You worried my appearance would embarrass you in front of your important friends. Well, I have standards too. I expect kindness. I expect respect. I expect a daughter-in-law who loves my son for who he is, not for what she thinks he can provide." I looked directly at Michael and son. "I expected you to stand up for your own father. A man's character isn't measured by his bank account, but by his integrity. Last night, you failed that test." I turned back to the stunned crowd. "So, as the owner of this venue and the man who is technically paying for every part of this lavish celebration, I have a final wedding gift for the happy couple." I paused, letting the tension build. "The bill, it's all yours." I dropped the microphone on the stage. The thud echoed through the silent hall. Temprimera Tuned walked down the steps and headed for the exit, not once looking back. Some people chase wealth their entire lives, but I've learned that the most valuable things like respect, dignity, and true love can't be bought, and they should never, ever be sold. Primera sa W, my son Michael, in the dressing room. His suit, perfectly tailored. Not a single crease, out of place. He looked like he'd stepped right out of a magazine. When his eyes met mine, a strange, awkward smile flickered across his face. It was the kind of smile you give a stranger you've accidentally made eye contact with, not your own father on your wedding day. He wasn't sure whether to hug me or hide me. "Dad," he said, his voice a little tight. "You made it." I forced a grin, trying to push down the unease knotting in my stomach. "Of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, my voice sounding heartier than I felt. He glanced around the room, as if checking for spies, before leaning in and lowering his voice to a whisper. "Listen, could you maybe sit toward the back? Sabrina's family, there. Well, they're kind of particular about the photos." I froze. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, hard to breathe. For a moment, I was sure I'd misheard him. "Particular," I repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the air between us. "Michael wouldn't meet." My gaze. His eyes darted to the floor, to the wall, anywhere but at me. "Yeah, you know," he mumbled. "They just want everything to look upscale. You know how it is." He said it so casually, but each word was a dagger. There's no pain quite like the realization that your own child, the boy you raised, is ashamed of you. I felt a cold wave wash over me, but my face remained a mask of calm. I nodded slowly, as if I understood completely, as if it didn't hurt. "Sure, son, whatever you need." A wave of relief washed over his face, and he gave my shoulder a quick, almost dismissive pat. "Thanks, Dad." Then he turned and walked away, back to his new, shiny life. In that single heart-wrenching moment, I knew This wedding wasn't about love. It wasn't about two families joining together. It was a performance, a carefully staged production designed to showcase ego, status, and wealth. And I, the man who gave him life, was just an unwanted prop, an inconvenient piece of his past that they wanted to shove into the background. The ceremony began. The music swelled, grand and dramatic. The bride, Sabrina, floated down the aisle looking like a movie star, her every move calculated for the cameras that flashed like a summer fireworks display. And there I was, in the very back row, tucked away among strangers. I watched the son I taught to ride a bike, the son I stayed up with when he was sick, promises forever to a woman who couldn't even show his father basic respect. When the officiant finally reached that classic line, "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace," my heart gave a painful lurch. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stand up, to shout, to rip apart the golden facade they had so carefully constructed. But I didn't. I stayed silent. I stayed seated. Because true revenge isn't loud and explosive. It's quiet. It's patient. And it was just getting started. After they said I do, we all moved to the reception. It was even more extravagant than the ceremony. Crystal chandeliers glittered like captured stars, casting a brilliant glow over tables draped in pristine white silk. Waiters moved silently through the crowd, their trays laden with champagne and caviar. It was a scene of obscene I found a quiet corner near the bar, nursing a drink, just watching, observing. It was then that the next act of this painful play unfolded. Sabrina, my new daughter-in-law, glided over with a gaggle of her friends, all of them dressed in designer labels and dripping with jewelry. They looked like a casting call for a reality show about the rich and bored. They barely glanced my way until one of them, with a tinkling, artificial giggle, pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me and asked, "Who's that man over there?" Sabrina didn't even bother to lower her voice. "Oh, that's just Michael's dad," she said, the words dripping with careless disdain. "He's simple, doesn't have much." She then leaned in closer to her friends, whispering conspiratorially, but making sure it was just loud enough for me to hear every single syllable. "I guess money skipped a generation." Her friends erupted in cruel, high-pitched laughter. Sabrina smirked, a look of smug satisfaction on her face. And my son stood right beside her, his face a blank canvas, and said absolutely nothing. He let her words hang in the air, a testament to his spineless. Silence can be the most brutal form of betrayal. My knuckles turned white around my glass. My first instinct was to slam it down, to let the rage I was bottling up finally explode. I wanted to shout, to walk out, to leave them to their hollow celebration. But no, that would be too easy. That would be giving them exactly what they wanted. They would dismiss me as a bitter old man and continue with their perfect illusion. So instead, I did the last thing they expected. I smiled. A calm, quiet, knowing smile. Because I was holding a secret that made their petty insults and snobbery completely powerless. You see, this entire venue, every single inch of this magnificent vineyard, it belonged to me. The very ground beneath their fancy tables, the ancient stone walls that made their Instagram photos look so perfect, the vines that produced the wine they were so pretentiously sipping it, was all mine. I'd bought this land over 20 years ago, back when it was nothing but acres of dry, dusty soil and broken-down fences. It was a forgotten piece of countryside nobody wanted. Years later, when a luxury developer saw its potential and wanted to transform it into this high-end wedding estate, I didn't sell. Instead, I quietly retained full ownership, held within a trust managed by my company. It was a silent investment, a ghost asset. Nobody knew. Not the developers, not the event planners, and certainly not my son or his new bride. The sweetest revenge, I've found, is the kind that begins long before the insult is ever spoken. The more they laughed at me, the calmer I became. The more they looked down on me, the taller I felt. They thought I was a poor, simple old man, a relic from a life my son was desperate to escape. They thought I was beneath them. But soon, very soon, the masks were going to drop. And the final act of this performance was going to be one they would never, ever forget. The dinner started, and the toasts began. Sabrina's father, a loud, prideful man with a flashy silver watch, raised his glass. To my beautiful daughter, he boomed, and to her wonderful husband. May their life be filled with success, fortune, and he paused, shooting a smirk right at me. Maybe a little bit of luck from the other side of the family, too. The room erupted in laughter. Cameras flashed. In that moment, the absence of my late wife, Margaret, felt like a fresh wound. She would have despised the spectacle, the cruelty, the arrogance, all the fake smiles. But when you've lost everything once, insults don't sting anymore. They just sharpen your focus. I stood there quietly, just waiting, watching, and measuring every word. Then, it was Sabrina's turn. She took the microphone for a speech, thanking her bridesmaids, her father, her incredible husband. And then, she turned to me with a saccharine sweet smile. And of course, to Michael's stead, she said, her voice dripping with mock kindness, "We're so happy you could be here, even with your busy schedule." The crowd let out a little chuckle. It's just so good to know that true love doesn't care about, social class. The room roared with laughter this time. My heart pounded once, hard, like a clap of thunder before a storm. I simply smiled, nodded slowly, and raised my glass in a mock toast. Because right then, I finally decided. Tomorrow, everything they had built on a foundation of lies and vanity would come crashing down. I've learned that the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about letting them destroy themselves. Well, you just stand there, holding the match. Later that night, the laughter from the reception still echoed in my ears as I drove home under the quiet hum of the streetlights. I replayed every single smirk, every snide remark, every dismissive look from Sabrina and her father. And through it all, one simple truth became crystal clear. They didn't just see me as lesser. They needed to believe it. It was the only thing that made them feel powerful. You see, pride isn't a sign of strength. It's just a mask that weak people wear to hide their own emptiness. I parked my old truck, walked into my quiet home, and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The old clock on the wall, Margaret's clock, ticked softly in the background. She'd bought it for our first anniversary. I looked at her photos on the mantle. "Guess you were right, honey," I whispered to her picture. Money doesn't change people's hearts. It just exposes them. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I just sat by the window, planning, not out of anger, but with a clear sense of purpose. You see, the vineyard where the wedding was held, the entire estate, even Tehian, the catering company they hired, all of it operated through a web of subsidiaries. Subsidiaries of a single entity, Darson Holdings. My company. It was a name nobody ever connected to me, because I always stayed in the shadows. I never flaunted my name. I never craved the spotlight or applause. But now I was going to use that invisibility to remind them what real power looks like. True revenge isn't about rage. It's about control. The very next morning, the wheels were already in motion. I called my lawyer Harold, a man who'd been with me since the very beginning. "Harold," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I want every single contract tied to that vineyard frozen by noon. No exceptions." He hesitated for a moment. "Sir, including the event accounts?" "Especially those," I confirmed. Harold sighed, but he knew better than to ask why. By the time the sun was high in the sky, every invoice, every payment, every single balance related to that extravagant wedding was legally on hold, pending ownership verification. That meant all the wedding bills for their luxury venue, the gourmet catering, the photographers, all of it was about to bounce right back at them. The same people who had mocked me were about to get a reality check they would never, ever forget. Some storms don't come with thunder and lightning. They arrive quietly, on a piece of paper. Later that day, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Dad, what's going on?" He sounded frantic. "The vineyard manager just called. He said all the accounts are locked. Sabrina's dad is absolutely furious." I kept my voice steady, calm. "Maybe they should try talking to the owner." He let out a frustrated groan. "Dad, please, not now. This is serious. They said if we don't clear the payments immediately, they're going to cancel the brunch event today." A small smile played on my lips. Then I guess they'll have to call me. And sure enough, within the hour, they did. The manager of the vineyard, a polite man named Ethan, was the first to reach out. "Mr. Dawsony began. I'm so sorry to bother you, but about the party from yesterday." "The wedding?" I interrupted, cutting straight to the point. "Yes, sir. The groom's father. I believe that would be me," I said. There was a moment of complete silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard a faint, sharp intake of breath. "Sir, I had no idea." "You weren't supposed to," I told him gently. "But since they're using my property, I think it's about time I make an appearance. You see, you don't always have to shout to reclaim your power. Sometimes a quiet, unexpected reveal speaks volumes louder than any act of revenge." By that afternoon, I was heading back to the vineyard. But this time, things were different. I didn't sneak in through the back or try to blend in with the staff. I walked straight through the main entrance, wearing the exact same jacket, the same shoes, the same outfit of the poor man they had all laughed at and dismissed just the day before. As I approached, I could see Sabrina's father, red-faced and yelling at the manager. "This is completely unacceptable. We paid for this venue. This is a breach of contract." Ethan, the manager, was trying his best to de-escalate the situation, glancing nervously in my direction as I got closer. "Sir, if you'll just calm down. This is Mr. Dawson." "He's irrelevant," Sabrina's father barked, cutting him off without even looking at me. "We're dealing with professionals here, not the janitorial staff." It's funny how arrogance is always at its loudest right before it's silenced. I stepped forward, my steps slow and deliberate, my voice calm but firm. "Actually, Mr. Hayes, you are dealing with a professional, the professional who owns this vineyard." The color drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. "Estaré dat me," his mouth slightly agape. "Excuse me." Without a word, I handed him a neatly folded document. It was a copy of the ownership papers clear, signed and officially stamped. "Dawson Holdings," I said, pointing to the name. "That's me." He blinked, staring at the paper, then back at my face, the recognition slowly dawning. Sabrina, who was standing right beside him, looked as if she'd just seen a ghost. And Michael. My son's mouth was hanging wide open. "What?" "Está mered," his eyes wide with disbelief. I turned to face him, locking my gaze with his. "You said you wanted important people at your wedding, son." "Well, you had one. You just didn't recognize him. Sometimes, the truth doesn't need to be shouted from the rooftops. It just needs to be shown, laid bare for everyone to see." The entire room went still. The only sound was the distant, cheerful fizzing of champagne, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that had fallen. Sabrina was the first to try and break the tension, letting out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Oh, come on. You can't seriously expect us to believe." I cut her off, my tone leaving no room for argument. "I don't need you to believe anything. I just need you to understand what you've just lost." Then I turned to the vineyard staff, who were all watching with wide eyes. "This event is canceled, effective immediately." A collective gasp rippled through the room. "What?" Sabrina shrieked, her composure finally shattering. "You can't do that!" "This is our brunch." A cold, hard smile formed on my face. "Actually, I can. You see, yesterday, you thought you married into this vineyard, but the reality is, it's mine. And so are the accounts that were paying for your lavish wedding celebrations. And as of this morning, those accounts have all been locked. The best kind of revenge is the kind that's perfectly legal and very, very public." Sabrina's father sputtered, his face a mixture of purple and white. "This is outrageous. Do you have any idea who I am?" I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a low, quiet tone that was somehow more intimidating than any shout. Do you know who I am? He fell silent. He couldn't answer. His eyes darted frantically towards Michael, who was standing, frozen, pale as a sheet, visibly torn between his new wife and his old father, between loyalty and a deep, gut-wrenching shame. Dad, Michael whispered, his voice barely audible. Why? Why didn't you tell me? I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, and felt the pang of sadness. I wanted him to be happy, but more than that, I wanted him to be a good man, a man who valued character over status. This was a hard lesson, but a necessary one. A lesson in humility, in respect, and in recognizing the true value of people, not their price tag. Sometimes, the most valuable things in life are the ones we fail to see right in front of us. Thank you so much for watching. It's a powerful reminder to never judge a book by its cover, because I wanted to see who you'd become without the money. Primera Saeed softly. And now I know. For just a moment, I swear, I saw a flicker of regret in Michael's eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared when Sabrina grabbed his arm, whispering, "He's bluffing, Michael. Don't listen to him." I held out my business card to her. "You can call the county clerk's office first thing in the morning. They'll confirm everything for you." She didn't take it. I could see her hands trembling, the perfect manicure suddenly looking fragile. I turned to leave, my point made, but at the door, I stopped and looked back over my shoulder. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, my voice calm, but carrying across the suddenly silent room. "You might want to cancel those honeymoon plans. The travel company you used. It's also one of mine. And funny thing, the payment bounced. Revenge is sweetest when it teaches a lesson, and the lesson here was that everything they thought they stood on was borrowed, not owned. The silence that followed me out the door was so thick you could choke on it. As I walked back to my old, reliable truck, the one they'd laughed at, I could almost hear Margaret's laughter in my head. It wasn't cruel, it was proud. It was the sound of a woman who knew what true strength was. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing incessantly. Dozens of missed calls from Michael. I looked at the screen, then set it face down on the table. I didn't answer a single one. That night, I poured myself a glass of good whiskey, sat by the fireplace, and just stared into the flames. My heart felt heavy, but strangely calm. They wanted to measure a person's worth by money and status. Fine. I just showed them what real power looks like. It's the kind that doesn't need to scream to be heard. It's the kind that can take everything away without raising its voice. True wealth isn't about what you can show off. It's about what you can take away without saying a single word. By sunrise the next day, the story had already started to spread, not through tabloids or social media posts, but through whispers. Powerful whispers. The kind that move faster than fire in a dry field, from one influential person to the next. Revenge doesn't always need to go viral to be effective. Sometimes, it just needs to find the right ears. Sabrina's father, the esteemed Mr. Hayes, had apparently tried calling the vineyard again that morning. Demandante. Fix the misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding to fix. Every contract, every receipt, every invoice for that opulent wedding was frozen under my authority. And the best part, for him, the worst part, the lavish bills for the catering, the overthapped decor, and the fleet of luxury cars he insisted on, they had all been issued under his name. The very man who mocked me for being poor was now staring at a mountain of unpaid debt that would make his head spin. The irony was so rich, I almost chuckled. Meanwhile, my son Michael was growing desperate. He showed up at my house that morning, knocking on my door like a man drowning, gasping for air. When I opened it, he looked nothing like the confident, polished groom from 2 days ago. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie was gone, and his eyes were red and puffy. He looked broken. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking, "I need to explain." I stepped aside, leaving the door open, but I didn't say a word. I just waited. "Go ahead," I finally said. He took a deep shaky breath, trying to compose himself. Sabrina. She didn't mean those things, she said. She gets nervous around people. She says things she doesn't mean. I raised an eyebrow, my expression unreadable. Nervous. Nervous enough to humiliate her husband's father in front of 100 guests. He flinched, the words hitting their mark. I know. I should have said something. I should have stood up for you. But you didn't, I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm. You sat there, Michael. You sat there and let them laugh. You let her laugh. It is hard to forgive silence, when all you needed was for someone to speak up for you. He rubbed his temples, a gesture of pure exhaustion and stress. His voice broke completely. I was embarrassed, Dad. I didn't want them to think we were. You know, poor. And what would have been so terrible about that? I asked, my voice softer now. Since when did being honest, or having a history, become something shameful? Was I supposed to pretend I was never a mechanic, that I never got my hands dirty to provide for you? He had no answer. His shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked like a little boy again, lost and confused. Dad, please, he pleaded. Her father's furious. He says we'll be ruined if you don't fix this. He's threatening to call his lawyers. I let out a slow breath. Let him, I said calmly. Let him call his lawyers. Let us see what they have to say when they find out he signed contracts he can pay for. Michael's face went pale. So you're really going to do this? You're going to ruin us? Your own son? I looked him straight in the eye. Ruin you, Michaelim. Not the one who tied your future to a woman who values a bank account more than a person's character. You did that. You chose her family's approval over your own father's dignity. The silence in the room was heavy with unspoken words, with years of father-son history. I didn't do this to ruin you, I continued, my voice measured. I did this to wake you up. You've been so blinded by the sparkle of their world, you've forgotten what actually shines. You forgot about integrity, about loyalty, about family. He sank into a chair, putting his head in his hands. What am I supposed to do now? He mumbled. That's for you to figure out, I told him. You're a grown man, a married man. It's time you decided what kind of man you're gonna be. Are you going to be someone who chases after shiny, empty things? Or are you going to be someone with substance? Someone your mother would have been proud of. The mention of his mother was a low blow, and I knew it, but it was necessary. He needed to remember where he came from, what our family was built on. Not money, but love and hard work. She deserves a second chance, Dad, he said, looking up, his eyes bleeding. And so do I. A second chance is earned. Michael, it's not given just because things get hard, I replied. Show me you've learned something. Show me you understand what really matters. Then we can talk about second chances. I walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, a broken man. I love you, Dad, he whispered. I love you too, son, I said, and I meant it. Which is why this is so hard. Now go. You have a lot to think about. As I closed the door, I leaned against it, the weight of the morning settling on me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding. But I knew, deep down, that some things, once broken, can never be put back together in quite the same way. And maybe, just maybe, that's for the best. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in this situation. I let out a low, steady chuckle. Let him try. He'll find out soon enough that every single contract he signed gives me the upper hand. He's not suing anyone. He's going to be begging me for mercy. Michael just sank into the chair, his hands visibly trembling. Dad, what are you doing? I looked at him. Really looked at him, this boy I'd raised, who'd he grown into a man so obsessed with appearances that he completely forgot the foundation holding him up. I'm teaching you a lesson. Primera sighed softly, one that money can't buy. You see, some lessons are just too valuable to be taught gently. For what felt like an eternity, he said nothing. The silence stretching between us felt like a lifetime's worth of distance. Finally, he muttered, "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I let out a long sigh. "Do you really think I enjoy watching my own son lose himself to greed and shame?" "No, Michael, I'm not enjoying this. I'm correcting it." He shot up from his chair, his face flushed with anger. "You're ruining my marriage." I met his glare with a calm, steady gaze. "No, son, I'm just wiping away the gold paint so you can finally see what's really underneath." That night, the fallout began, and it was spectacular. Mr. Hayes's phone was blowing up. All the vendors wanted their payment immediately. The media had already caught wind of a high society wedding gone wrong, and Sabrina's carefully constructed perfect image was cracking like thin glass. You can polish a lie, but you can't keep it shining forever. By the third day, it was Sabrina who showed up at my house, not Michael. Her. She arrived in a sleek, black car, wearing sunglasses, even though it was a cloudy, overcast day. But when she stepped out, she didn't look glamorous or powerful. She looked desperate. "Mr. Dawson," she began, her tone syrupy sweet, like honey dripping from a spoon. "I think there's been a huge misunderstanding." I just crossed my arms, not moving an inch, has there? She forced a nervous smile. "Look, I know I might have said some things that sounded, well, a little rude. But we're family now. We shouldn't be fighting over something as silly as money." The quickest way to spot a manipulator. They suddenly start preaching peace the moment they lose control. I gestured toward an empty porch chair. "Sit down, Sabrina. Let's talk." She hesitated for a moment, then sat, carefully crossing her legs as if she were posing for a magazine cover. "Old habits die hard, I guess. Michael told me you have quite a bit of money. Primera adenoidea. If I'd known, I would have..." I cut her off right there. "Treated me better." "Is that what you were going to say?" Her fake smile faltered, just for a second. "That's not fair. I just didn't realize that I owned the vineyard." I interrupted again, my voice firm. "The travel agency. The catering service. That I'm the man who paid for your entire wedding without you even having to ask." She swallowed hard, the color draining from her face. "I didn't mean to offend you. You didn't offend me," I said, my voice turning cold. "You revealed yourself, and that is the most valuable thing you could have possibly done for me. People always show their true colors when they think you can't do anything for them. It's a lesson I learned a long time ago." Her eyes flickered with panic. "Mr. Dawson, please. My father is furious. He's threatening to pull all our family's investments from Michael's projects. Michael is absolutely devastated. We can fix this." I leaned forward, making sure she could see the finality in my eyes. "You can't fix respect once it's broken, Sabrina. You can't buy back dignity after you've sold your soul for status." She shot up from her chair, her mask of civility completely cracking. "You think you're teaching us something? You're just a bitter old man, punishing everyone else for being happy." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just smiled. A small, knowing smile. Happiness that's built on cruelty isn't happiness at all. It's theater. "And your show just closed." She stood there, fuming, speechless. The curtain had fallen, the lights had come up, and all that was left was the uncomfortable truth. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. See you soon. Revenge isn't about shouting from the rooftops. It's about knowing exactly when to say nothing at all and just watch their carefully constructed world collapse on its own. She stormed off, the sound of the door slamming shut, echoing through the house. But as her car sped away, tires squealing against the pavement, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The final act was still coming, the one that would leave a permanent mark. That evening, my phone rang. It was Ethan, the vineyard manager. "Sir," he said, his voice a little tense, "Mr. Hayes is here again. He's demanding to speak with you. And he brought investors." A faint smile touched my lips. "Perfect. Tell him I'll be there in 20 minutes." When I arrived at the main house, The scene was exactly as I'd imagined. The once proud Mr. Hayes looked smaller, somehow diminished. A sheen of sweat coated his brow, and his voice was laced with a panic he couldn't quite conceal. "You can't do this," he barked the moment he saw me, gesturing wildly. "We have guests, reporters. You're making a complete fool out of me." I took a slow step closer, completely unbothered by his outburst. "No, Mr. Hayes. You made a fool out of yourself. You did that the moment you chose to mock a man you thought had nothing." His hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. "What do you want? Is it money? Fine. Name your price. I'll buy you out." I let out a low, dark chuckle. "You couldn't afford a single corner of this vineyard, let alone the whole thing. But I don't want your money." His face twisted in confusion and anger. "Then what?" he snarled. I leaned in, my voice calm, measured, and utterly final. "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that every toast you made, every condescending insult you whispered, every single laugh at my expense, it all happened under my roof. And now," I said, pulling back, "it's over. The most powerful moment in any revenge isn't the shouting match. It's that quiet, dawning horror on their face when they finally realize you never needed their validation, their approval, or their respect. All you ever really needed was their silence." He stormed out, muttering empty threats he knew he couldn't back up. His entourage of investors followed close behind, whispering amongst themselves, their confidence in him clearly shaken. Within a week, the whispers turned into headlines. Word spread like wildfire that Mr. Hayes' company was under a massive investigation for unpaid debts and fraudulent practices. His carefully curated image, the proud, successful father of the bride, crumbled to dust overnight. And Michael, my son, finally showed up a few days later. He was humbled, quiet, and looked utterly broken. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a sorrow I hadn't seen in years, and said, "I'm sorry." Daddy just nodded. "You don't owe me an apology, son. Just promise me you won't forget what kind of woman you married." He hesitated for a moment, then looked down at the floor. I think I already have. Some heartbreaks, I realized, are blessings wrapped in incredibly hard lessons. As he walked away, I knew this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about closure. Closure for all the years I'd stayed silent, swallowing my pride, for the respect that had been buried under his wife's arrogance. And yet, deep down, I knew there was one more thing left to do, one final move to make, the final strike that would end this entire performance once and for all, because Sabrina, his wife, still thought she could escape unscathed. And I had one more lesson to teach her this time, in front of everyone who once laughed right alongside her. The final act of revenge isn't anger. It's revelation. 3 months passed. Autumn arrived, painting the vineyard in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. But beneath all that surface beauty, I could feel a storm brewing. They say, time heals all wounds. Sometimes that's true. But other times, it just sharpens the blade. The word around town was that Sabrina and her father were getting desperate. Their businesses were sinking fast. Their investors had all but vanished, and the sprawling mansion they'd boasted about so endlessly was quietly listed for sale. But I knew their true humiliation was yet to come. Then, one crisp evening, an invitation arrived. The envelope was thick, the cardstock expensive. It was for a charity gala, hosted by none other than Sabrina herself. A fundraiser for youth empowerment, of old things, as if she'd suddenly grown a conscience overnight. And there, at the top of the guest list, was my name, written in bold, deliberate ink. Nothing screams desperation louder than a fake act of public generosity. Michael called me that night, his voice strained. "Dad, please don't go." "Why not?" I asked calmly, already knowing the answer. "Because it's going to be chaos," he pleaded. "She's trying to prove something. She's setting a trap." I allowed myself a small smile. "Good. So am I." The night of the gala was electric. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite, all dressed in their finest, sipping champagne and making small talk. They were the same people who had attended the wedding, the same ones who had smirked at my simple clothes and whispered behind their hands. Tonight, they were in for a different kind of show. I arrived fashionably late, making sure all eyes were on me as I entered. Sabrina saw me immediately. A flicker of panic crossed her face before being replaced by a brittle, practiced smile. She glided over, her dress shimmering under the chandeliers. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "It means so much to have your support." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, my tone neutral. Later in the evening, she took the stage to give her keynote address. She spoke of resilience, of second chances, of empowering the less fortunate. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. As she finished to a round of polite applause, she made her fatal mistake. "And now," she announced, her smile widening, "I'd like to invite one of our most generous, albeit surprising, donors to the stage. He's a man who understands the value of hard work from the ground up. Please welcome him." All eyes turned to me. This was her play, to put me on the spot, to frame me as a simple farmer endorsing her new, fraudulent philanthropic image. She thought she was controlling the narrative. She was wrong. I walked to the stage, took the microphone from her hand, and looked out at the silent, expectant crowd. "Thank you, Sabrina," I began. "It's true, I do understand hard work. I also understand integrity, which is why I'm not here tonight to support this event." A collective gasp went through the room. "Instead, I'm here to make an announcement of my own." I paused, letting the tension build. "As of this morning, I have successfully acquired the outstanding debts of Hayes Corporation. All of them." I turned to look directly at Sabrina, whose face had gone completely pale. "Which means, technically, I now own everything your father has, or rather, had, including the mortgage on your family home, which, I'm sorry to say, is now in foreclosure. Furthermore," I continued, my voice ringing with clarity, "every dollar raised here tonight will not be going to some vague youth empowerment fund. It will be redirected, legally and in full, to the dozens of small businesses and employees your family has refused to pay for the last 6 months." The silence was deafening. The revelation hung in the air, thick and heavy. I placed the microphone back on the stand and walked off the stage, leaving Sabrina frozen in the spotlight, her carefully constructed world shattered before the very people whose approval she craved. There was no shouting, no anger, just the cold, hard, inescapable truth. That was the final act. Not revenge, but justice. Not a performance, but a reckoning. And as I walked out of that ballroom, leaving the whispers and shocked faces behind, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The vineyard was quiet when I returned, waiting for a new season. And for the first time, so was I. The ballroom glittered under the weight of crystal chandeliers. Champagne flowed and smiles were as polished and plastic as the mannequins in a storefront window. Sabrina, a vision in a golden gown, moved through the crowd with a grace that was both beautiful and utterly rehearsed. Every turn of her head, every laugh that tinkled just a little too perfectly, seemed to scream, Just for a fleeting moment, behind that brilliant, glittering smile, I saw a flicker of fear. "Mr. Dawson," she called out, a little too loudly, rushing towards me with her arms outstretched as if we were the dearest of friends. "How wonderful of you to come." Her performance was flawless. I gave a polite, measured nod. "I wouldn't have missed it, Sabrina. I'm always happy to support a good cause." She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound, clinging to her act like a life raft. Yes, of course, we all have to do our part and give back, don't we? Ah, the irony. People who build their entire existence on appearances have only one true fear: exposure. The evening wore on. The clinking of glasses, the endless parade of speeches, the blinding flashes of cameras, capturing moments that meant nothing. The air buzzed with manufactured excitement. Then, just as dinner was being served, the host for the night, a well-known local reporter, stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her smile beaming out at the sea of faces. "Our major announcement this evening comes from our incredibly generous event sponsor. He's a man whose quiet philanthropy has been changing lives across this city for years. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Richard Dawson." A wave of polite applause swept through the room. Sabrina froze mid-sip, her wine glass hovering near her lips. Her smile didn't just falter, it stiffened, cracking like fine porcelain. You see, the most exquisite form of revenge is when your enemy hands you the microphone themselves. I made my way to the stage slowly, purposefully. I took the microphone, my hands steady, and scanned the glittering hall. Every eye was on me. "Thank you," I began, my voice calm and clear, carrying easily through the silent room. "It's a genuine honor to be here tonight. When I first received the invitation, I thought I was simply coming to support a worthy cause, and I am. Though perhaps not in the way any of you are expecting." The low hum of conversation died instantly. A curious stillness fell over the audience. I could see Sabrina out of the corner of my eye. Her smile was twitching uncontrollably. I continued, my gaze sweeping over the crowd. "You see, a few months ago, I attended a wedding. A beautiful ceremony, right here in this city. It was expensive, elegant, everything you'd expect. And at that wedding, a young woman looked me directly in the eye and, with a dismissive little laugh, called me poor." A collective gasp rippled through the room. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, whispering to their neighbors. "She had no way of knowing," I said, my tone remaining perfectly even, "that every single flower, every artfully arranged dish, every last inch of that magnificent celebration was paid for by me. She didn't know that the very land she stood on, toasting her champagne to her good fortune, was mine. And she most certainly didn't know that the inheritance she so carelessly mocked was worth $53 million. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Every face in the room was a mask of shock. I turned my head and looked directly at Sabrina. All the color had drained from her face, leaving behind a pale, terrified stranger. "She believed that money was the ultimate measure of a person's worth," I said, my voice now carrying a quiet strength. "That wealth was the sole arbiter of dignity. But I learned a long time ago that money doesn't change you. It only amplifies who you already are. And so tonight, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to offer a simple reminder. Arrogance always comes with a price. The best revenge isn't about destruction. It's about revelation. It doesn't tear them down. It simply pulls back the curtain and lets the world see them for who they truly are." A murmur erupted, spreading through the guests like wildfire. Phones were already out, screens glowing in the dim light, recording every second. Sabrina finally found her voice, though it trembled violently. "Mr. Dawson, I think that's enough." I raised a hand, not to silence her, but as a gentle gesture. "No, Sabrina, it's not nearly enough. Because I learned something else that day, too. You can never, ever shame a person who built everything they have from nothing. You can only, in the end, shame yourself." The room exploded. It was a strange, chaotic mix of stunned gasps and sudden, sharp applause. Sabrina's father leaped to his feet, his face a furious shade of beet red, barking orders at the staff to cut the cameras, to shut it all down. But it was far too late. Within hours, the story had gone viral. Socialite exposed at charity gala by secret millionaire father-in-law. The headlines were brutal. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. We'll see you in the next video.